Hi there. Welcome to my home office. Some of you from back in the day probably remember this is where I used to record everything. It's in a different location now, but I've been feeling all week that I need to check in in a more public fashion. So sorry, the lighting's not great because I don't often record in my home office. I have a studio that I do that in, which is not that much more outrageous or professional. It's just a better spot and it's dedicated to that. Anyway, all week I've been wanting to check in. I will do these Astro walk-in talks. They are audio files that I will share with the Catalyst membership, kind of like midweek, depending on how things are shaping up and if it's necessary to do kind of a midweek check-in. So but this seems to just the last couple of days, I'd say even the last week, to be perfectly honest, but especially since the third quarter moon, which, we had our third quarter moon on, let's see, Monday in Scorpio. The moon is in Sagittarius right now, so it's definitely lifted a little bit emotionally, but there's some things that we should talk about, and I really want to just check in with everybody. So if you do like this small Astro, and in this case, we're going to talk about the Schumann resonance check-in, you may want to consider Catalyst membership, all right? I have to plug it just because it's my business. So, and everything you can need, wherever you're watching this, there's either a description box or on social media, there's a way to access my website, catalystenergies.net, and you can get everything you need. Okay, so especially because this is going to be posted on my Facebook page, which I hardly ever do, but I feel like I need to put more of this stuff out there as well. So let's get right into it. So there have been, and I'm sure anybody who's watching this can probably confirm this in their own life, either personally, someone in their immediate personal orbit, even just something that they have heard or been made aware of that is around them. There have been profound disappointments. So it especially, certainly since the full moon, but even they've, like I said, really reached a peak when we had our third quarter moon. So for those of you who are part of the Catalyst membership and you are receiving the bi-monthly energy readings that I do, you know that the last two readings, so the past month, the readings have been very challenging and difficult, right? That there are lots of things that we all are working with and working through, and a lot of guidance on how to shift or change the nature of situations that would lead to a lot of disappointment and certainly an inability to really accept the closure of a situation. So there's always opportunities. I just had a client with challenges, and I was just telling my husband about, I had a regular client yesterday who shared with me something about their health coming back around and dealing with a very aggressive form of cancer that they have treated over and over again, and this person's attitude is amazing, and she's like, I get, Spirit puts these challenges in front of me, and it's my job to make the best of them, to find the opportunities. And I really appreciate that perspective so much. And so there has been a lot of that to kind of get realistic about the underlying nature of things instead of getting caught in the surface level of the things that are disappointing, that we are feeling. There's been a lot of kick in the teeth type of energy, I'm not going to lie, and it's spanning the spectrum. So like I said, it peaked with the Scorpio moon, in my opinion, and so we are sliding out of this year of the snake right now. The next major lunation is the annular or ring of fire solar eclipse on the 17th of February, which is also the beginning of the year of the fire horse. So we're about to come into eclipse season. We're about to come into a new astrological year, and the fire horse, it's already especially with all of the readings that I've been doing and preparing for the fire horse, giving people at least a 6-month forecast, the consistent message that's coming through everybody's charts, even that they're different, different placements, different houses, different things going on in their lives. The main thing that seems to different zodiac signs in Chinese astrology, the main thing that keeps coming through over and over again for all of us is that there's so much momentum that is going to just pull us and push us and drive us through this year. And the potential for burnout is really, really high without a strategy in place about where you're putting your energy, to what extent, what direction, the hows, the whys, and being very responsible about it. So a lot of we're still in a lunar cycle that started with the Capricorn new moon. And Capricorn is a sign of responsibility because it is about more than just ourselves, our own power, our own creations, our own works and labors, right? Capricorn is about the welfare of the whole, right? The ecosystem as it all is linked together. And that means that oftentimes we have to see and know a bigger picture. And the new moon in Capricorn that we had, this lunar cycle that we're finishing out the year of the snake, really has challenged us to see the meaning behind the meaning, right? To read the room, to be able to read the writing on the wall, and to understand the underlying messaging, the underlying pattern to the things that are happening, because it's not just about us. Now, a lot of times, at least in my personal experience, and certainly with other things that I've been observing or have been just on the receiving end of people sharing things, a lot of the kick in the teeth energy has, for the most part, been the result of our own doing, right? And so there is a need to take responsibility for those things rather than get caught up in the victim mode. Now, there's been plenty of opportunities, and even today, as I'm going to show you in the chart, plenty of opportunities to get out of that victim mentality and really experience a moment of true healing where we really transcend that role of being a victim and taking responsibility for the events that do feel incredibly disappointing, disillusioning, right? And maybe we had an expectation of something that turned out not to be the case, but then when we really look at all the steps that have led up to that situation, we realize, oh, this is how I participated in creating this overall structure. So that's part of Capricorn too, is that we are all participating in the health of the ecosystem that we're part of, and taking a step back and being able to see how everything is fed into that is really, I think, the challenge and the intention of this last lunar cycle. And it's not just 1 month or one lunar cycle. We're finishing out the year of the snake. So, the last vestiges of whatever we're shedding are wanting to come off, whether we want them to or not. And, we can't just cling to that old skin because it will come off. And in some cases, it's being ripped off. So if you're finding yourself in that position of profound disappointment, that kick in the teeth, getting your hopes up about something to have it fall through, this is the time to maybe just go back and retrace your steps, right? Look at the bigger pattern for how things got to where they are, so that you can develop a more sound strategy moving forward, because the year of the fire horse is going to take us, whether we like it or not. And there will be lots of people who will just be dragged kicking and screaming or have no idea what's happening as this fire horse just shoots out the gate. So there's a lot of astrology. I am going to be doing the actual eclipse forecast next week publicly, so just keep an eye out for that. We'll look at the main areas, the main transits, the places and the times to look out for, and the general themes. But even right now, there are things to pay attention to. So before I get into the astrology, let's talk about the Schumann resonance. Now, Yesterday in particular. Now, hold on, let me back up here. I've been watching and waiting for what I'm about to show you for about a week and a half. You know, the Schumann has been, for the most part, fairly quiet, but there have been some things that have really drawn my attention that I'm like, what's going on here? It seems like nothing's really happening, but there are things under the surface that seem to be elevated, or there are certain harmonics that, as we're going to see in the actual Schumann resonance itself, that have been present but have been flying probably under the radar, except for those people who are probably the people listening to this who have who pay attention to how their energy feels. How does the energy feel of other people around you? You know, what are the more subtle shifts and changes that you pick up intuitively, or in terms of your dreams, maybe your interactions, maybe your own emotional state, but there's nothing in particular that's really that you can really point to. So I've been tracking this for a while, and I'd say the last week and a half. And then, you know, as of yesterday morning, what we're going to see here, actually, I'll share the screen so you can have a visual here of this whole thing, is, let's see. Oh, it won't let me share it. Let's see. There we are, the main parameters. So, and we'll do a little bit of education here about how to read this. Just in case you don't know how to do so. And it's, and you know, I talk about this quite a bit. So hopefully you can see it. So we're going to scroll here. There we go. So you can see the whole thing. So the Schumann resonance is basically, for those of you who are still learning or you don't know what it is, it's basically the frequency of the electromagnetic field that's emanating from the planet itself, right? So sometimes it's called the heartbeat of the Earth. It is supposed to be at in the Schumann resonances, designating the 7.83 hertz. That is the frequency of this oscillation, right? And it gets excited, or it changes, the frequency will change, the amplitude will change, the quality will change when the ionosphere is triggered in some way. So a lot of times it's because there's more electricity bouncing around in the forms of storms and lightning. Also too, you will get that with increased seismic activity. So there was a large earthquake in the Fiji area, but that's not unusual. So, but what is unusual, like if we were to go back, let me see here. I want to go back and show you the home page. Actually, let's do that so you can get a visual, and then we'll go back and look at this. And I know that this is probably a little drawn out, and let me see here. Bookmarks. Okay. I just want you to see how it's been quiet, and then you see all of this, you know, all of this stuff here, right? Red and white, and this is when the Schumann amplifies, okay? And so it had been, you know, there's been some stuff happening, but this is pretty substantial. Now, I hadn't checked it until this morning, and the last time I checked it was yesterday, early morning, so it hadn't actually started to amplify until after I checked it. But wouldn't you know it, you know, there were people at my office who were like, gosh, I'm really sleepy and I just don't feel good, right? Just out of nowhere. And I felt kind of sleepy for no reason. My stomach was a little weird for a little bit. And, you know, I just felt this really strong urge to put this smoky quartz back on, which, if you're familiar with smoky quartz, it really helps mitigate the effects of radiation, basically, right? It helps ground you and protect you from those types of things. And so I was like, you know, I'm going to put this back on. I'm always wearing shungite, but I, you know, switch up the other mineral that I'm wearing, and I just felt like I need to put this back on, and I'm really glad that I did. And I have this huge piece of smoky quartz that's like right by my head, by my bed, so it helps when I'm a little bit more vulnerable, like in the astral and when you're sleeping. But anyway, so here you can see that there was a large blast, and there'll be all kinds of stuff on social media talking about, you know, ascension symptoms, and, you know, we just got an upgrade and blah, 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 blah. And so whatever speaks to you is fine in terms of what this means. I'm just going to give you the facts of what this actually means, and you can take it for what it's worth. What I did notice, though, is that this has been building over days, and we are coming into the last days of this, not only the eclipse cycle, right? Because when the eclipses happen, you're finishing out an eclipse cycle, the last one, 6 months ago, roughly. And then you're also coming into a new year, right? The year of the fire horse from the year of the wood snake. So I'm not surprised that the ionosphere, for whatever reason, is amplifying. So the way that I've explained it before, so now let's look at the actual, the breakdown of the actual frequency, amplitude, and quality. So the way that I've explained it before to people is based on my background as a musician and as a music student. So you have the top row, which is frequency. You have the mid row here, which is amplitude, or how loud it gets. And then you have the quality, right? So what's the frequency? It's how many wave functions per unit of time, right? That's what frequency is. And the higher the frequency, the more wave functions you get per cycle of time. So, so many per second, and that's measured as a hertz. So when people talk about frequency, they're talking about how many wave functions do you get in a cycle of time. And often when you have a tone that's a higher frequency, it's usually a higher pitched, right? Or if you're talking about light, visible light, the higher frequency light is towards the blue, indigo, purple, and white end of the spectrum, right? That's why if you study like stars or stellar physics, the blue stars are not only more massive, but they're more luminous because they have a higher frequency of light. This is also where gamma radiation is, and things that outside of the visible spectrum are higher frequency. So that's what frequency is. Now, the frequency of the Schumann resonance is often pretty stable at 7.83 hertz, but you can see that there's lots of variations, and then there are different lines here that represent different harmonics. So what's a harmonic? Well, it's the same tone, but at a different frequency. So for instance, as a musician, and you can do this with your voice too, the throat singing is actually a really good example, but if you play an instrument, like a wind instrument, for instance, you'd play the same note on your instrument, but you would change your embouchure, right? You change your embouchure, the shape of your mouth, to get a higher tone. And so each of these lines of frequency represent a different harmonic. Well, this red line has been doing weird things for the past week and a half that have been out of alignment with the rest of what's going on. So before I get to that, let's explain the rest of it. What is this? The middle row. This is amplitude. This is the same as the volume, right? And so when you see all those white patches on the sonogram of the Schumann resonance, you see that what you're seeing is an amplitude increase, right? It gets louder. It's turning the volume up, right? Now, what I have noticed for the most part consistently is that when the volume gets turned up on the Schumann, the frequency drops. And there's a reason for that, in my opinion. And I'll get to that too. And some of you already know this. I've explained this before many times. But just in case you're new to this, I want to explain it again because it's important to understand with how we're going to talk about the spiritual implications and the energetic implications of something like this so close to a major turning of the wheel, right? And this type of stuff, you can look it up for yourself. It's really easy. You can just type into your Google search bar with the AI mode and say, what does it mean? How does the red line of the 20 or here, sorry, let me back up. Sorry. Sometimes my brain moves faster than my mouth can keep up. Okay. Let's back up here. The red line is a harmonic of the Schumann resonance at 20 hertz, okay? So remember we talked about a harmonic, which is the same tone, but it's at a different frequency. And you get that by changing the pressure, or you get that by changing your embouchure, the shape of your mouth if you're playing a wind instrument. If you play a string instrument, you get a harmonic because you put less pressure on the string when you pluck it, right, on the fretboard, and it gives you a harmonic. So the red line, And all of these represents a harmonic at 20 hertz. Wow, you type into Google, what is the impact on the human body at 20 hertz? I invite you to do that yourself. But some of the things talk about anxiety, nausea, headaches, right? So I'm watching over the last week and a half this red line doing weird things. It's out of sync with the rest of the Schumann. So it's here with the frequency and it's here with the quality. So what's the quality? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the quality of the wave function. So if you play, and I played a wind instrument, so I'm going to use that as an example. So imagine you're playing your wind instrument and you're playing a tone, right? It's a flat tone, it's a certain tone, and you're playing it. And, you know, if you've ever been like an actual music student at all, you know that some of the most crucial yet incredibly boring work you're going to do is just playing tones, because you want to be able to play that tone like perfectly without any reverberation or any change to what? Oh, the quality. Now, you play your tone and imagine that you amplify it. You play it loud without your embouchure changing. Well, what happens? The tone drops, right? So there's the frequency drop, and then the quality of it is dropped as well. So you'll often see when there are natural changes to the Schumann that happens. Well, what's going on with this red line with the amplification and this red line in the quality? Because it's not matching what's happening. Well, my opinion here is that this 20 hertz that is underlying this harmonic of the Schumann resonance. And what is the Schumann? It's extremely low frequency. Look that up. How does extremely low frequency affect the human brain, right? We're entrained to it. We can't not respond to it. The brain, the human brain, the animal brain, probably all nervous systems on this planet, probably, but I know human brains specifically, are entrained to extremely low frequency. It's not something you can block. It's not something that you can necessarily mitigate. It is a natural and like almost primal connection, right? Which makes sense that we would be primally connected through our nervous system to the Schumann resonance, okay? But imagine this 20 hertz somehow out of alignment with the rest of it, right? And it's subtle, right? You don't even notice it because it's a harmonic, but then you have all of these symptoms, right? You have headaches and nausea, anxiety, a feeling of dread. And how many of you have felt anxiety for the past week and a half that's either not yours? I'll raise my hand here because, of course, part of being in the healing arts and especially doing body work and energy work physically with people is that I physically empath them. I've been getting people's pain. I've been feeling people's anxiety. That's not mine. I've been having my own anxiety, of course, and it's seemingly coming out of nowhere. So we're looking at this happening. Is it natural? Is it a function of our relationship with the planet? Is it some sort of, unnatural, technological harmonic? I tend to think that that's mostly the case, but it's not necessarily always the case. There was a little bit of geomagnetic storm activity, and the sun has been pretty quiet since all of those crazy flares, right? I mean, granted, things have been bouncing around, but it's interesting that we had a little bit of like storms, solar storm conditions out of nowhere. Like, what's that all about? Well, maybe this explains it a little bit. So I wanted to come on here and talk about this because I've been feeling this anxiety that's not mine. I've been, people have been having, like I said, the disappointments, the disillusionment, the kick in the teeth type of energy, the really bad news, all of this stuff seems to be part of, this change in the Schumann resonance. So I wanted to point that out just to validate how maybe you've been feeling or other people have been feeling and how we kind of can't get away from this. Now, are these ascension symptoms? I don't know. I am more of the opinion that there is no, it's not just one or the other. It's not just all technological, but it's not all just spiritual. I mean, it all is just spiritual at the end of the day. But I would say that the way people have been feeling and is potentially being influenced very subtly through the use of certain technologies that can trigger these harmonics, right? And it's very subtle. We don't know that it's happening, but all of a sudden people are feeling over emotional and having anxiety. They're feeling really sleepy. They're feeling nauseous. They're having all kinds of other issues. So that's what I wanted to share with the Schumann resonance, just to be like, hey, there's actually an energetic correlation here to how maybe you're feeling. So here's, let's look at the chart now. I'm going to stop sharing that. I'm going to close this out, and we're going to look at the astrology chart, because what's interesting is we always have this temporal map, always. Even if it's being used to guide decisions and actions and for nefarious reasons, because that's happening too. That's just all there is to it. However, what I'm seeing in the astrology currently, we are in our third quarter moon phase. Like I said, let's make sure here that everything is, yes, formatted appropriately. So a couple things to pay attention to if you haven't already. Number one, Mercury is not only in Pisces now, it is coming into its retrograde shadow. What does that mean? That means that Mercury is now coming into the territory that it will retrograde in. So it is now coming into conjunction with the north node of the moon, and this position is really important. This north node is where this degree is where Mercury is going to retrograde back to when it does station to retrograde. And there are specific times where connections to this north node from Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and eventually Mars are going to have, but specifically Mercury, Venus, and the Sun are going to have an effect. And the energy of this degree of 8 to 9 degrees Pisces in particular is kind of like this year the fire horse energy. It's like a jockey spurring his horse out the gate, right? And so it's just going to be felt, underlying under the surface, right? Because that's what the nodes of the moon represent, the trajectory of the soul on its journey. It's not something that our personality is necessarily experiencing in the moment. It's something that is deeper, more karmic, that is driving us, but we may not be consciously aware of it. Now, the thing is, with Mercury, we'll be a little bit more consciously aware of it. But, Mercury in Pisces is nebulous and, difficult territory, because as much as the mind then starts to be more kind of surrounded by more spiritual, more idealistic, humanitarian energy, it also, it's really easy to get caught up in delusion, into fantasy, into daydreaming, into confusion and fog. That's the other thing too. And so even though that's all surrounding it, there's still this connection to the soul's journey that is happening right now. So that's something to pay attention to. So mark it, whatever's going on for you. This is an important moment. And the nodes of the moon are part of why we have eclipses. So, well, not even part of. They're the main component of why eclipses happen, of the nodes of the moon. What are the nodes of the moon? It is the place where the lunar orbit crosses the ecliptic plane, or the solar orbit. So when we have new and full moons in conjunction with the nodes of the moon, we have eclipses, right? So that's something to pay attention to. Some other things that really stand out to me about today in particular, Venus has now moved into Pisces. It was one thing when all of the, when Mercury and Venus and even the Sun still in Aquarius, but when Mercury and Venus were in Aquarius, it was really easy to kind of emotionally disconnect from the collective. Like, we were kind of getting the downloads. We're kind of, able to be aware of the collective consciousness. But when it comes into Pisces, it's not just an awareness mentally anymore. Like, we're feeling all the feels, and that becomes overwhelming. And Venus at 2 degrees Pisces is actually a really good thing to the degree and the symbol associated with it is a really good thing to kind of wrap your head around, because it's about exercising caution, because Pisces is like everything is blended together now. There is no separation between you, me, and spirit in the realm of Pisces, right? It is the undifferentiated ocean of spirit. But we still are here as humans in this experience, and there is a need to exercise a bit of caution. And Venus, what we value, what is important to us, security, safety, beauty, harmony. In Pisces too, it's very spiritually oriented, and there's a lot of there's a lot of feelings of brotherhood and humanity, and really valuing that, and also artistic inspiration. The muse is part of the Pisces element as well. So, but there's a need to exercise some caution. And Venus in Pisces, I think, maybe will bring this out for us today, as we, we have to take care of ourselves, number one. So valuing ourselves, valuing what it is that we put our energy into, and taking care of ourselves is important. Also, exercising caution about relational aspects, because Venus does rule relationships as the seventh house ruler, right, of Libra, but also our resources. Venus rules Taurus, or the second house. So there's a need here, and there is assistance, if you want to call it that, from Venus at this degree of Pisces, to be exercise some caution, right? If you just let everything and anything glom onto you, then you're just going to be sucked dry by all of the, psychic vampires out there. A really good mental image for this, and it's really funny. If you've watched the show What We Do in the Shadows, if you're familiar with it, you know exactly where I'm going. But if not, it's always worth finding some clips of Colin Robinson. He is the emotional vampire of the group, and so if you need to get an idea of how they function out in real life, it's quite brilliant and really funny. So this is one of those moments of hey, this, you may really feel it, and the value of it, and in terms of your relationships, your resources, this need to exercise a little bit of caution. You have to have some boundaries here. Otherwise, it's just going to take, people just take, or other entities are just going to take from you. So this is important. The other thing that's really coming up today too is another sextile, as you can see, to Chiron, right? Speaking of the wounded healer and victim mentality, we've already had a couple of these sextiles, these 60-degree angles here with Chiron. And then the sun coming into this position is the next iteration of this potential for real healing. And I feel like that where Chiron is sitting in Aries is really drawing us to trusting, the infusion of spirit into our lives, right? And the symbol of 23 to 24 Aries is these curtains of a window are just kind of blown in, and they take the shape of a cornucopia. And if you know what that is, right, it's, this horn filled with all the goodies, right? And it represents this ability to not only be open, but to be molded by the influence of spiritual forces. But we have to be open to it, right? That's the open window piece. And with Chiron, of course, we're kind of in this weird place where we're going to exercise some caution here, and we're being, we feel in our actual feels, or in our bodies, or in our relationships, or in our resources, our material possessions, whatever that is, to exercise some caution. But there is a difference between that, but still being open to the influence of spirit or God in our lives to bring us that which we desire, right? And I'm talking about deep soul desires, not necessarily surface level desires, that you want a big house and a fancy car, or, a bank account that never runs dry. Those are all great things, but I'm talking about at the soul level, the desire. And so when I feel like that the healing potential here with the sun coming into this sextile, again, is about how we can teach others, we can be an example to others if we allow ourselves to be open to the influence of spirit in our lives. And then we can really identify with the role as kind of a guide or teacher. And that's the thing about Chiron, as the wounded healer. I mean, Chiron was a teacher and a healer, as well as this immortal, centaur type of being that had to give that all up in order to free himself, right, from his own pain and suffering. But there's teaching and guiding that's involved with Chiron. And I feel a lot of this coming from this sextile. And this is the third of these sextiles over to a newly direct Chiron. So it's not as if there aren't aspects right now that can guide us and give us a sense of where we can put our energy, as opposed to just feeding into all of the disappointment, the disillusion, the confusion. There's a lot of confusion with Mercury in Pisces, that's for sure. And I want to point out before I close out here with this video, this check-in, that on Friday the 13th, Saturn is going to move into Aries, and that's going to be, I have a feeling that we're going to really feel that. We're going to really see that out in the public realm. We're going to experience that in some way, shape, or form. So just be aware of that. We get 2 Friday the 13th this year because March also has a 13th. March 13th is also a Friday. So that's, I think, it's not lost on me, at least. Maybe for some people, they don't really pay attention to that, but I have a feeling that those dates are going to be really important, and not the least of which is this Friday. So in 2 days from now, Saturn moving back into Aries, which, by the way, it is not happy in Aries. Saturn is weak in Aries, which means that it will overcompensate, or the energy will overcompensate by becoming much more strict and restricting. And restricting is something like Aries is really difficult. The other side of that, though, is that you can decompensate, right? That you're not strategic enough. There's not enough authority. There's not enough responsibility. You're just kind of letting it all go. So finding that balance is really, really important. So I hope that you found some value in these morning ramblings here about the Schumann resonance and the astrology of right now. We're in a really high energy, high intensity time. There's a lot happening. There's a lot that's kind of balancing. We are finishing out big cycles, right? Lunar cycle, eclipse cycle, Chinese New Year cycle, right? The year of the snake, where that skin is coming off. And for some people, it has been painful, and some people are hanging on to that skin like it is, like it's not just a dead layer that needs to go. And to give yourself some grace, and for the people around you too, because if you don't realize that that's just a layer of skin that needs to be sloughed off, it can feel like your whole life is being pulled away from you. And it's like that this time of year anyway. It's difficult at this time of year, right? And I know of 2 instances already where people, one was a very high profile event in my town, where somebody did a very public self-deleting. Not at the time, he died a couple days later from his injuries, but it was very public and it was very traumatizing. And then other people I know who, just friends of family members, doing the same thing, self-deleting. So it's already difficult at this time of year, and I just feel like that it's that much more right now. So please take very good care of yourselves. Realize that sometimes what you're feeling is not yours, and this is why that energetic hygiene and being very meticulous about your practice is really important, because there's so many ways to scramble your brain and make you feel a certain way when it's not even how you feel, and then your actions and behaviors stem from that and ripple out and cause all kinds of effects and things that sometimes can't be undone, right? So please take very good care of yourselves. Let me know what you think in the comments section if you feel so called. If you're interested in Catalyst membership, where I'm much more consistent about these types of check-ins, readings, all that stuff, you can go to my website and check it out. And I will see you guys in a couple of early next week. I would say Monday or Tuesday. I will be recording and posting the actual eclipse forecast for the Aquarius Ring of Fire solar eclipse. We're going to have a Virgo total lunar eclipse on the 3rd of March and begin the year of the fire horse. So take care, everyone. I'll talk to you very soon.